Hi, I'm Emma, and welcome to In Conversation With, the space where I speak with an amazing woman around your health, wellness, and spiritual self. In this episode, I had the absolute pleasure of speaking with Jamie Csizmadia Thornhill, where she shared her story of connecting to her intuition at the lowest point of her life, and how she now specialises in providing online and intuitive readings, as well as intuitive mentorship courses, private health and wellness retreats, multidimensional ethics courses, and trauma-informed care training, all with a fierce love, humility, and light-hearted humour. So if you're someone who would love to trust themselves more deeply and connect with yourself with love, listening to Jamie might be exactly what you need to feel inspired. Enjoy our conversation, and you might let me know in the comments how intuition shows up for you, or if you'd like to trust yourself more deeply. So welcome to another In Conversation with me, Emma. And today I've got a really amazing woman here with me. We are going to have a conversation with Jamie Csizmadia Thornhill. Got your name right?
Beautiful.
Jamie. Jamie is a co-founder of Casa Galactica, which is a multi-dimensional centre for healing and evolution in the Sacred Valley of Peru. And Jamie's going to explain a little bit more about what a multi-dimensional centre is. She's also an intuitive medium, a multi-dimensional mentor and teacher, an ethics specialist, and trauma-informed care practitioner. And Jamie specialises in providing online and in-person intuitive readings and intuitive mentorship courses, private health and wellness retreats, multidimensional ethics courses, and trauma-informed care training, specifically dedicated to those of us who are inner truth seekers and service-driven healers, those of us who really desire to know and embrace and to live our highest calling in service to others and in the service to shift to love on planet Earth. So Jamie supports us in all of that with the work that she does. And we're going to have a conversation today around living a truer version of ourselves, because Jamie and I connected a few months ago now, actually, for a reason. And immediately, and I know that in her bio, she writes that she does her work with fierce love, humility, respect, and light-hearted humor. And I was like, yes, she does. That's how we really connected. So we're going to talk about becoming truer versions of ourselves, trusting ourselves innately, and how the heck do we do that? How was that? How did I do, Jamie?
Well, Emma, I'm over here getting chills. I'm like, ooh, I feel like I'm watching. I'm like, this is going to be good. Yeah. No, I'm looking forward to it. And Emma, I believe you had mentioned that it might be helpful to describe or expand on what a multidimensional center is, or what multidimensional ethics are, what the heck that even means. So hi everybody, I'm Jamie. Emma, it's so great to be here with you this morning. It's so great to have a conversation with you anytime. I just really enjoy your company and your insights and everything you have to bring from your own experience. I'm looking forward to chatting with you here today too. So I'm co-founder and intuitive medium at Casa Galactica Multidimensional Center for Healing and Evolution. I co-founded it with my husband, Michael Thornhill, who also is a multidimensional healer. And when we say multidimensional, why do we call it a multidimensional center? It's because our focus is on, our overt conscious focus is on that which is beyond the physical, that aspect of each one of us that is infinite, that soul, that spirit, that essence, that, you might hear some people, it's referred to in many different words and many different phrases, that I am present. It's basically that part of us, that higher self, that's here with us beyond or simultaneously with the physical. So here I am, Jamie, in this body, in this incarnation, with this brown hair, wearing these glasses. But there's another aspect of me, of us, each one of us, that's here, that's not physical, that's beyond space and time, that's one with all things. And I could use lots of words to describe all this, but really it's something that I think people have more of a direct experience with at times or moments, or they practice connecting with that part of themselves, or being or stemming more from that part of themselves. So when we do work with people, because I'm an intuitive medium, my husband Michael is a channel. What we are very aware of is that we are all multidimensional. We're not unidimensional, we're multidimensional. We're having a human experience. And then we also have that spirit or soul self that has that connection to God, to all beings, to all consciousness, that's intact already. And whether we are attuned to that or not, or whether we remember it, or whether we ever get in touch with it or even care about it, it doesn't matter. It's still there and we're still expressing from it. It's never not with us. It can never be diminished. And so when we work with people for what we just kind of call healing and evolution, which can be healing or transforming from trauma and evolving into truer versions of ourselves, or knowing truer version of ourselves, expanding our consciousness. When we work with that, we know that we come from a place of recognizing that we're all multidimensional. And so we work from that place. And in that, we have a tendency to connect with or work very well with people who are stepping into their own awareness of that within themselves, whether they're having an awakening experience, becoming aware of their own intuition, starting to work purposefully, actively with their own trauma, those types of things. We just already acknowledge, yeah, you're going to come into contact with that more expansive, infinite version of you. And we purposefully, consciously work with people from there.
There's just so much in there. As you were speaking, I was like, oh, I want to talk about this, and oh, I want to talk about that. I wonder first if we go into a little bit about how you came into this space, into this work. How did you end up in Peru? And you don't need to tell the whole story. What is your experience of this work being woven through your life?
Great question, Emma. Thank you. So when I was a child, and when I say this, I can already kind of feel a lot of us have had an experience like this, or are aware of experiences like this in different ways. It's all very unique to each one of us. But when I was a child, I grew up in Oklahoma in the United States, and the ecosystem there is Central Great Plains or tall grass prairie. And I grew up in the country, and we lived in a house in this sort of subdivision that was right on the edge of prairie. And I would run out when I was a kid, I would run out and play outside. My brother and I just nonstop played, as many of us do when we're kids. And I would run outside into the tall grasses. They would be about, 1.5 meters high. I would run out into them and I would lay down in the middle of them, out in the middle of a prairie field. And I was very aware that the plants were excited to see me. And I was also equally excited to see them. And I would be laying on my back, looking up at the sky with the grasses kind of over me, dancing in the wind. And they would be telling me jokes, and I would be laughing, and I would be telling them about my day, and I would tell them about my friends. And there was always just such like bright, lively, happy energy from the plants. I also know that, when I went to my great grandma, she had a big garden in the back. She had loads of roses. Roses were huge to me when I was a kid. The smell of roses, going out in her rose garden, and I knew I was connecting with or talking to the roses. My grandmother, same thing. She loved ornamental plants, and she took very good care of her backyard garden, and it was beautiful. So I'd go out and hang out with her. My mother was a vegetable gardener, and she also planted trees and did all. So the matrilineage of my family, everyone was very into working with plants. And so as a kid, it was just natural for me. And I was very aware of being connected, spirit spirit-wise to plants. I didn't know how to describe that or explain that. I just knew that if I wanted to, I could run out in the field and hang out with the plants and that I could have conversations with them. Now, long story short, a few things happened to me when I was a kid that were traumatic. I experienced several abuse situations. And when those things happened, I also was aware of what I would call, this isn't meant to scare anybody. This is just, again, when you're working very actively, consciously, multidimensionally, these things are just part and parcel of this work. There's sort of love, spirit that's very aligned with love, and there's spirit that's sort of like riding the fence, and there's spirit that's aligned with fear. Just like in our human experience, we can kind of look at different people and say, oh, she's very kind, generous. That person over there seems sort of angry and resistant. We kind of have a sense of people's energy. Spirit equally has various energy. When I was a kid, experienced these moments of abuse, I was aware of there being negative or fearful energies with that physical abuse that was happening. And so I was experiencing the physical component of the abuse and also the spiritual or the non-physical energetic of the abuse. And it scared me. And so when I was a kid, not consciously, but just out of self-preservation and protection, I just shut down my connection. I can't tell you that I was, 8 years old going, I think I'm going to shut down my intuitive connection. It was just like an instantaneous, like, I don't want to see that anymore. And so for the rest of my life, I went along sort of unconsciously forgetting about my connection to spirit. When I was 35, I had a bottoming out in my life. A 15-year relationship came to an end. I was no longer interested in the work I was doing and the job I had. As a person, individually, emotionally, I started recognizing I had a high level of codependency. I was a little concerned about that and the problems it might be causing me. And so I just kind of had a moment when I was 35 of like, I need help. Something's got to change. And this was my awakening moment. Many people, everybody has a different moment or time or period of something happening or some switch getting turned on within us that's like, there's got to be something more, where we start seeking something deeper, truer. When we start seeking ourselves, we start seeking God, and we start seeking connection, intuition, truth, authenticity, whatever those things are, whatever language. I basically had a bottoming out, and with the help of friends and peers and a support group, I was sort of inspired to start praying. And I was not religious or spiritual at the time in any sort of conscious way, and definitely not religious. And I was like, God, I feel like it would benefit me to pray, but oh my God, like what? Because a lot of us, depending on where you are on the planet, religion is often used to oppress people, to control, to manipulate, to enslave. Oftentimes, religion is not the most uplifting. It can be and has an opportunity to be, but depending on your life experience. And so with me in my life, I had seen religion be used quite oppressively and used to incite fear. So when I considered praying, I thought, I don't know how this is going to reconcile with what I see in the outside world. But lo and behold, I just decided I'll try it. So I started praying to what I felt like was God. And I was just saying inwardly, having long conversations daily with God, like, oh my God, I'm having such a hard time. I don't know what I'm doing. Can you please help me? I don't get why this keeps happening. Can you help me see myself better? Plus, I had support groups, I had peer help and friendship support. Through that prayer, within that first few months of praying inwardly, I started I thought I was just sort of imagining what God looked like. The first version of God came on the scene, and it was this very short Native American woman with sort of shorter hair and spectacles, and she had a cane and a white V-neck t-shirt, cut off jean shorts, very specific. Okay. And I just thought, oh, this is interesting. Apparently, this is what I envision God to look like. Okay, But then as I continued praying, uh, another version of God would come on the scene. And this time it was a younger looking woman with very long, straight black hair, very, very strong motherly energy, also felt like a dear friend. And I would just be like, okay, I guess today this is what God looks like. What was happening that I didn't know at the time, and I was journaling as I would be talking to God and I would be receiving this great guidance, okay? Like stuff that I couldn't come up with at the time. I was a mess. And I would be receiving this really great guidance and help with certain things. And I would write about it. And then I'd go back and read my journal later and I'd be like, this is really helpful. And I would be like, is this me? Am I just giving myself advice? And I would read it again. I'd be like, I don't have this knowledge or this wisdom because I'm floundering, and at that point I was floundering. And I talked to some friends that knew me at that time and they're like, yeah, you were a mess. So I've got some really sweet friends who are honest with me. So I was floundering. So this insight, I started realizing this is not me. This is coming from somewhere else. So I kind of, when I would go into pray now, I would start being like, are you God? And it'd be like, no, I'm a guide. And I'd be like, what's a guide? Oh, it's your spirit guide. So I started engaging these aspects of God. I call it now the many faces of God. I started engaging them directly and having conversations with them. Lo and behold, I started figuring out they're my spirit guides. And I started looking online, what's a spirit guide? Seeing that, oh, there's such thing as spirit guides. Okay. So what started happening is I started becoming aware of my own spirit team, my own higher self. God was there, but more like an overarching umbrella. And then I started realizing that if I asked for help, I would get it. Every single time I would get it. And I was like, I'm going to keep doing this. This is awesome. And it was really helpful. I was really changing and growing. I was applying the things and taking them and taking action on the guidance I was being shown. And my life was changing. And so I just knew this is great. And then Emma, lo and behold, I started recognizing that when I would be sitting with a friend or a loved one and someone might be telling me something challenging or difficult they're going through, oh, I'm trying to figure out, and I don't know if I should take this job. As they were talking, I would start feeling guidance come through for them in the same way that it would come through for me when I prayed. And I would be like, what is going on? This is so strange. And finally, with one or two friends that I know love me and trust me, and I trust them, I said, I've been praying and this information's coming through, and I feel like there might be some information coming through for you. Would you want to hear it? We'll see how it goes. And, I've got great friends and like, yeah, I could use some help. Like, okay. So I started sharing when someone would be talking, I started sharing what would be coming through. And it proved to be as helpful to other people as it was to me. And so that's kind of how that evolved. The long story short is that I believe I've been this way my whole life, and I get the impression many people are, but because of our physical, cultural, human collective conditioning that 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 does not necessarily encourage or empower us to put our attention towards that infinite self, we just get sidetracked or distracted. And sometimes something can happen later on in adult life. A lot of the students that I work with in my Intuitive Mentorship 101 course speak about when I was a kid, I had what I thought was an imaginary friend. Or when I was a kid, there was this sweet voice that would always talk to me and tell me what to do. So oftentimes people have experiences of being connected as a kid, and then it kind of goes away for whatever reason. Then something happens later on in adulthood that sort of snaps it back away. And that's basically what happened with me.
I am so curious about one little thing, and I'm just going to ask it before I forget, because we all know about my memory. when you say you started taking action on the information or the advice that was coming through, so by this time you had been journaling a lot, you were starting to understand that these were guides, they were the many faces of God. And then you said that you took action on the advice. Was there any resistance to taking the action? Because if you were really bottomed out very low, sometimes taking action when we get advice from whoever, if people come, it can be really hard to take the action. Did you find it easy to take the action? Did you feel really supported in taking action? Or was it simple, small steps? There's 3 questions in one.
Yeah, Emma, that's a fantastic question. I was at that time, I was so bottomed out in my life that I was literally on my knees. And I think for me, that's one of the gifts of when we bottom out, when we have sincerely bottomed out and we're not scrambling to identify with something or fix or anything like that anymore. We're just on our knees. And I think at that time I was desperate. And I knew something in me, thank God, Emma, when I look back, something in me was like, something in me knew I'm the common denominator here. I could sit here and point fingers and be like, well, my partner, da 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 da, or my job or my boss. And if I wanted to, I could do that. I could feel it. I could do that if but something in me was like, I think I'm the problem. And I'm so looking back on that, I'm so grateful because that means I lost all interest in trying to blame or find cause for it outside myself. So I was done and I was ready to say, what am I doing? And I was ready to take full responsibility because again, I was on my knees.
The responsibility part, isn't it? It's
Yes.
responsibility, and also what's ready to transform, because whatever's going on at the moment isn't working so great for me. So I'm ready to look at all of that, to take responsibility and to take action, as you mentioned the word action, to try something different.
Yeah, and the other thing that helped me at the time, it's funny, I think you call it God, spirit, source, whatever has a way of working in each of our lives. In 1 week talking to 3 different people, I had 3 different people say to me, you might try Al-Anon, which is a 12-step recovery program for people who grow up in families that have alcoholism or addiction. But really, it's for people who have learned patterns of codependence. And so I had 3 people say, you know what, you might benefit from going to Al-Anon. And when the 3rd person said it, I was like, oh my God, okay, I'll do it. I don't know what this is, but I'll do it. So the other thing is, and that's a group recovery program. So you have an opportunity to step into that and benefit from the knowledge, wisdom, strength of other people who've been through what you've been through. And there's an opportunity or invitation there to have I'm going to call it a fellow traveler or sponsor who's somewhere down the road, 5 or 10 years ahead of you, who can help you like through sort of that transition of going from full-on codependence, unconscious codependence, stepping into taking responsibility for yourself, taking responsibility for your choices. So the other thing that I had that I was aware for me at the time, I wouldn't have been able to do it without, I had group support and I had a fellow traveler sponsor that would say to me when I was like, oh God, I need this to be this a certain way. And if this person doesn't act this way, that she would be honest and sincere with me and be like, okay, yeah, it sounds like you're having a hard time. And you actually don't need anybody to do anything. And I would be like, what? Like, mm-mm. So I learned a lot very quickly because also I was because I was desperate. I was open and willing to receive help even if I didn't know it or, fully get it or absolutely be able to trust it. I just was like, I have to be open to support and to other people's guidance because whatever I'm doing over here by myself isn't working. So I was also, like you said, that action part. I think because I was so desperate, Emma, I was just like, my life's not working. I was like, what's the suggestion? The suggestion is that I have a plan B, that if I think something's going to go a certain way and I don't know that I can rely on somebody, that I have a plan B in case they can't show up, and that I decide to go to the movie on my own and enjoy it by myself. Okay, I'll try that. I don't know what that is, but a plan B, sure, I'll try it. So I was desperate, and so I was willing to try anything. And so because of that, I was taking all of the guidance, all the insight, all the help on board and applying it. Now, Emma is, as you probably know in your own work and your work with your clients, like once we start applying that, we start one, making a habit of taking action, but then two, we start, because we take so much action, we start recognizing, oh, this works, that doesn't actually work. This is awesome for me. This over here looks like it could help someone, but I don't really resonate. We start having more clarity and discernment about what works for us when there was no clarity or discernment before. So the other thing that happens through that process of taking action, we also start learning ourselves. Oh, it really works for me to journal. Someone else is like, no, I don't really journal. It works for me to sing. Someone else is like, actually, what works for me is to be able to do Tai Chi and really move the energy in my body. And everyone's very unique and different about that. So when we start trying these new things, start taking steps, any action, we start realizing what actually works for us and what doesn't. We start being able to have more clarity, have more discernment, have a better sense of, that sounds good. I'll try that. No, not that. Not today. Thank you. So anyways, I think desperation helped.
Desperation helps. Yeah, that'll help us along. And I think it's interesting as well, isn't it? When you've had your own experiences, do you find that really helps when you're working either in group coaching or mentoring or teaching or with your students? Because you know perhaps where they're at, and I know that you're trauma informed. And actually, maybe let's speak about what trauma informed means for anyone that's listening or watching and isn't sure what trauma informed means.
Okay. Yeah. So trauma-informed care is basically something that anybody in any profession can start incorporating into their work. I mean, literally, you could be a cashier at a grocery store, you could be a librarian, you could be a rocket scientist. Oftentimes, it seems to be worked with most prominently in health, wellness, and medical professions. Okay, because a lot, physical trauma, emotional trauma, mental trauma. But it's something that anybody, anywhere, doing anything in any industry or profession can benefit from having an awareness of. So trauma-informed care, basically, for me, the origin point is basically saying, hey, guess what? More than likely, in each of our human experience, we've faced trauma at some point. Trauma can be, like, I mentioned from my childhood, trauma can be abuse. Trauma can be losing a family member. Trauma can be going hungry or starving. Trauma can be maybe you're a kid and your parents weren't able to keep jobs and you kept moving around from house to house and sometimes had to live in your car. Trauma can be being in a car wreck. Trauma can be being out for a jog and getting bit by a dog. There's so many different ways that we can experience trauma. The way we experience trauma is when something happens that causes physical, emotional, or mental harm, and causes the nervous system go up. Often in these experiences, we feel like we're alone and we don't have help. And so it on top of it being something really scary, it also has a tendency to emphasize there's no help. So if you were to ask me, I would guess that everybody has experienced trauma that has incarnated on this planet. As countries, we can experience trauma when there's war. Even if you live in a country where your country's going off to some foreign place and like causing war, and it's not happening on your home turf, but you can feel the trauma of that and the trauma of that experience. So lots of different ways that people can experience trauma. If you were asking me to, from my own sort of inner conversations with my own spirit team, my own higher self, my own experience of God, and the conversations I have with everybody about this, it can be traced back that at this time on this planet, I would refer to what we're experiencing as third density, okay, or the third density of choice or third density of separation. Well, I hear a lot of different people call it all sorts of things. I think it's all the same thing, just again, we all have different words for things that resonate with this. This experience is such that we come into, and again, it's just my own inner awareness of it, that we come into this experience and we have an opportunity, a gift, would you say, to feel separate from God, which at the soul level to me is devastating. I mean, there are some times where in my prayers with God, like I'm just like, oh my God, I miss that perpetual feeling of knowing the interconnectedness with the one, with love, with all consciousness. But in my observation, this third density planet Earth right now is purposely designed to where we get to experience separation from God. We get to feel like we're not connected to anything. We get to feel like we're sort of in this very individuated experience, having no help. And sometimes people call it the illusion or the veil. And it's a heavy experience that has us very focused on the physical. And we are forgetting that interconnectedness. For me, at a deep level, at a multidimensional level, I'm like the original trauma is being born into an incarnation where we feel separate from God. So running around in a lifetime where we feel like we're on our own, we have no support, we have no help, we have no connection. That's terrifying. Honestly, for me at the soul level, I'm like, what? Every once in a while, I'm like, what am I doing here? Why did I choose this again? What was the really cool thing about this that I thought was going to be great? But just because I know inside my home is that interconnectedness, that knowing of that interconnectedness. So trauma-informed care basically says, hey, I'm working from a place of recognizing that as a human, more than likely I've experienced, we've experienced trauma of some sort. Coming from that place, but another way of saying that, I'm acknowledging that you may be feeling separate from God. I may be feeling separate from God. We may all be experiencing separation from God, and that's devastating. And so I'm going to come from a place to where I acknowledge that and honor that and see that that could have an effect on you. It could have an effect on someone. It could cause someone to start thinking in sort of down spiral ways. It could cause someone to feel like they're not loved. It could have all sorts of effects on somebody. And that I'm going to recognize that that's more than likely what's happened or what's going on. And so I'm going to be considerate of that. I'm going to be compassionate of that. I'm going to be supportive of that. The other thing it's saying I also know, and I know this from direct experience, and I know this in all the work I do with my clients and students, I know that we can also transform ourselves through trauma, through working on or facing or embracing or being willing to see the trauma. We transform through it. And there's always, and this is what I love about it, this is like the best gift of it, there's always an opportunity through that trauma to know the self, to know God, to know the interconnectedness, to be more at home within versus the outside world. And so there's lovely things that result from working through that trauma, and people do transform, people do heal, people do come into an awareness of their more expansive self. And sometimes that's the route we take through that. So the other thing is too, from that vantage point of trauma-informed care, I'm looking at someone and I already know that they can transform and heal. I don't think they're stuck. I'm not looking at them and I'm not like, oh man, this person's really grouchy. I don't like them. They're just going to be stuck like that forever. I'm like, okay, this person seems a little restless. They seem a little nervous, a little vigilant. We'll find out maybe where that's stemming from. And we'll work with having a better awareness of that. And I know that through that, that person will continue to experience themselves as freedom, as liberation, as truth, as love. And so I already come from a place of, yeah, you're going to get through this. I promise. And I'm saying that also to anyone watching right now. You can get through it. You will get through it. I promise. And sometimes it happens in months, sometimes it happens in years, sometimes, God forbid, and I know this for myself, sometimes it happens over several lifetimes. But we can, we do, and we will get through this. And the more of us that are able to experience that and say that, it actually makes it easier for everyone else to do it and makes it quicker. So that trauma-informed care, like here's one of the tenets of trauma-informed care is, for instance, transparency. So where maybe in the past, depending on, again, where you live on the planet, whatever the collective consciousness is, whatever's happening, maybe in the past, there's been a lot more. I'm thinking of the 1950s in the United States, if anyone cares. Maybe in the past, there's been this moment where everyone's like, oh no, look, we're all fine. Everything's fine. No, everything's happy. Look, everything's shiny and clean, and I'm going to clean things more. And oh no, everything's great. And our country's amazing. And so is our government. And so is everything's fine. And this sort of like happy, shiny, everything's great. That's fine. And we know, when we look back at history, when we talk to our grandparents, when you know, we know that there was way more going on. I know that no matter how clean my grandmother kept the house, that she was suffering within from being relevant, from feeling like she needed to be relevant, that no matter how responsible and accountable my grandfather was to his Air Force job, that he was not able to actually express feelings because that would have been seen as weak. So transparency, for instance, is a tenet of trauma-informed care where we get to have an opportunity, permission to see how we feel, what we think, what our perspective is, what we'd like to share. We have an opportunity to share it. We give other people an opportunity to share without judging, without correcting, without fixing, without dismissing or diminishing, just holding that open space. Yeah, share. No one gets to comment on it. You just get to be you and share. And then we get to learn about ourselves through that. So we get to be transparent. We get to hold space for other people to be transparent. And we get to see what we learn from that and where that goes versus, no, you can't do that because someone might think this. So these are just, there's 5 or 6 other tenets of trauma-informed care. It's a whole topic in and of itself, but basically anyone coming from trauma-informed care is saying, hey, I have a feeling you've been through some stuff and it's had an effect on you, and it might be unconsciously steering your life. And I know that we can get there together, that we can have awareness of it, and that we can make that shift, transition, build in new behaviors, new patterns, new neural pathways, and that we can change.
That's it. And that's where you and I have had conversations of the unconscious, the subconscious. So yeah, these patterns, these behaviors that are kind of ruling your life and you're unaware of them, or you might be somewhat aware of them, we can gently and slowly and compassionately address them, give them space to be witnessed, to be presenced. Because often what I certainly found was, and we might call it in psychology, emotional bypassing, or it might be called spiritual bypassing, like you just said, just pretending everything's shiny and everything's fine, so just and there's a lot of talk about positive thinking and what you think directs your life. And yes, we know that the conscious mind is far less, it's less powerful than the subconscious mind, but it directs and talks directly to the subconscious mind. So when we can repattern or be aware of our thoughts, it's going to help our neural repatterning and our pathways. But just trying to be positive and trying to pretend everything's okay when it's really not, and not being able to voice those things, I mean, we could even go into the vibration of energy within the body and how that, if we can't express ourselves fully and truthfully, it really impacts our health, our well-being, and our identity, if you would say that.
Yeah, definitely. In ways that we can't even fathom. And it starts steering things.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So, what are some of the ways that you now engage with your students, or if people come to you for a session? How do you typically tend to work? And one thing we were talking about, actually, God, I've got this habit of asking like 3 questions in one.
I love
We
it.
we were talking about like pitfalls to, I think I might even have written it down. Did I write it down? Oh yeah, just sort of pitfalls that can happen around this type of work when somebody has come to that point where they've gone. I mean, they may not be right at rock bottom, but I speak to a lot of women that have come to a point and gone, is this all there is? I've done the thing I was told, and I'm still unfulfilled, I'm still miserable, and I'm becoming less miserable, and I thought I'd have this or that by now, or be in this place, or feel this way about myself or life, and I feel anything but that. And I always say it's never too late to turn your life around. It's never too late to start getting to know yourself, getting to know those aspects of yourself that have been repressed or suppressed, or perhaps were never allowed to be expressed, or that all rhymed, or to be shown. So when people come to you, do you tend to find that there are certain things that block them? Or because they've got to the point where they've come to you for guidance, for support, are they kind of more open to change, or do they have pitfalls that stop them, and what happens then?
Yeah, great question, Emma. Excuse me. As an intuitive medium, when I'm working in an intuitive reading, I have 60-minute and 90-minute online intuitive readings, and I work with new clients all the time. And then I also have clients who are repeat clients that have worked with me for years, and they know, for instance, they know, okay, I go and have an intuitive reading with Jamie 2 times, 3 times a year, and sort of get a tune in. I work with clients too that here's what happens just naturally when someone works with me over a period of time. Because of the way I work with my spirit team, and because I'm so emphasized on empowering people in their own intuition, just naturally the person starts plugging into themselves more and more and more. And that someone that's come and worked with me over the course of 3 years or 5 years, by the third or fifth year when they're coming in for an intuitive reading, everything that comes in the intuitive reading typically is confirming things they already know. They may not say it, the guidance is all given, and the whole time they're like, yep, I'm already doing that. Yep, I wrote that in my journal. Yep, that's the decision I made yesterday. And I just love that, because it's basically the person's getting more tuned into themselves, knowing their own path, knowing their own sense of direction. And spirit just comes through and says, everything you've been doing is right on. And so they make that connection, and that gets sort of emphasized or potentiated of like trusting themselves, if that makes any sense. So naturally, in the way that I work in my intuitive readings, anyone coming to seek guidance, whether you're just stepping into this for the first time or you've been plugging into your own sort of authenticity and direction for some time, it will naturally strengthen somebody's trust in themselves. Um, and we all can do that right now without having to do an intuitive reading, but sometimes we need a little help from each other. Okay. So it's not like, oh, you have to come do an intuitive reading to get, no, there's so many ways we can do this, and we can do it also individually, but these things have a tendency for people who are, a lot of the people I work with just naturally also are already sensitive, receptive, empathic, intuitive, energetically aware. Oftentimes I hear clients say, yeah, I can walk into a room and I can tell what's going on. Or when I talk to my friend, even though they're saying this, I can feel that she's actually sad. So people who already are aware that they're tuned into things at a level that may not be happening on the surface. And so when someone comes to work with me, especially in intuitive reading, I'll talk about mentorship as a student in a minute. When someone comes in for an intuitive reading, one of the things that is still to this day cracks me up is like when someone asks a question, guidance will be given. Okay, so it's kind of like that saying that you hear, ask and you shall receive.
Careful
This
what you wish
applies.
for.
What'd you say?
Careful what you wish for.
Yeah, it's like with an intuitive reading, 100% of the time, ask and you shall receive. And so what I find and what I find interesting is that, when I'm working with a client, say someone comes in for the first time, they say, well, how do we start? What do we do? And I say, well, I've already suggested ahead of time that they prepare a list of questions for themselves that they'd like to receive guidance or answers on. And so I say to them, we can start with your questions, or if you would just like to hear from spirit before asking questions, anything that they might have to share with you off the cuff, or it can be a combination of anything in between. So sometimes I can feel it when I'm working with a client that's like, I think I just want to hear from spirit. And I can feel there's a hesitancy. I'm not sure if I'm ready to ask my questions. Sometimes our questions tend to be about love, relationships, jobs, family, friends, soul calling, someone who's passed over, grieving, loss. And so sometimes there can be like a part of us in our human self, and I do this even when I connect with my own team for my own guidance. There's sometimes that I'll ask a question to my team and I'll say, be nice. And that's my way of going, be gentle with me, you guys. This is a hard question to ask. I want to know the guidance, but I also feel resistance. You guys know that and feel that. So please be gentle, because I'm just like, oh God, some part of us doesn't want to know. I'd rather just act like it's not happening and keep my blinders on. But we also know there's something causing us suffering or pain that's the reason why we're asking, because we want to move through it. So one of the difficulties I find that people may have, not everybody, and again, I relate to this myself, I still do this, it's just resistance to actually wanting to know the answer. Resistance to actually wanting to see the path, resistance to actually wanting to have the clarity. And get this, Emma, see if this resonates with you at all and anybody out there listening. I notice sometimes for myself, I know even I've got sort of some really lovely ego thought patterns or shadow thought patterns that come in when something doesn't seem to go the way I think it should, when I've decided it should go a different way, that I'm like, see, it's not going to work out for me. It never does. It's my classic. I'd like TM it, trademark that thing, because it's like one of my shadow ego thoughts that's like the favorite for everything. See, it's not going to work out. It never was going to.
Your absolute
Oh.
it was never going to.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, that's so sad. And I can feel some part of me that kind of loves that story. And I don't want to admit that because it's kind of weird, but I can feel it in words when I say it. Even when I say it more dramatically, like I'm on a stage in theater, I want to be like, it was never going to work out. It wasn't meant to. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so sad. And oh, you need help. But so I can feel that part of me that doesn't want that story to change. What if it's always worked out exactly like it was supposed to? And I can be joyful about that. Like even right now, I'm like, how dare someone say that? Because it takes away my love of that story. So I think even going to that level and recognizing there may be parts of us that really kind of like the story that's negative, that's
It's safe, isn't it? It's what we've got used to. Our brain tries to keep us safe. Our brain has a negative bias anyway. So even knowing that we might like those stories and just owning that and being accepting of it, we can see when that patterning even, oh, I'm doing that thing again of, "Oh, it's not going to work out. I'm going to have to say no to that because it's just not going to happen. It's never going to happen for me. Poor me."
ew, you've got a good one too. That was really believable.
that's my voice inside my head. And I think it's most people's as well. I think that's probably a shared experience of just that absolute was never going to work. Nothing ever happens right for me. Wasn't going to go right, was it? Yeah, I'm just going to, yeah. What can I do
Not
now?
do anything.
Nothing.
I'm not going to try anymore.
Can't do anything. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think, those are parts of ourselves that when we ask those questions, we also may come to realize, because right now, as I'm talking, all of a sudden I ask a question, I come to realize that I've got a storyline going that doesn't want anything new to happen.
Anything new, and it's resisting change. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you know what? Every time, and I always say this, I would, I'll say, "Oh, I hurt my own feelings," because like when I see that part of myself that loves that story, loves it, I'm like, "Oh my God, oh my God, I can't not acknowledge that there's some part of me that loves that and wants to keep telling it and like really like owns it and like identifies with it." And then my feelings get hurt by myself. I'm like, "Oh," and then I'm like, well. So I have all these weird, strange, or interesting inner conversations, but it's me starting to know all the different voices, right? Any one of us can do this, and it's all okay. But so often, too, when I'm working with a client in intuitive reading, the more someone works with me in intuitive readings, the more they start becoming aware of their stories, their unconscious stories, or the things that keep them from opening up to all the gifts that are on their path already and that will continue to flow. And so it can be overwhelming too, a little bit. One of the pitfalls to opening up to truth, authenticity, inner guidance, spirit's guidance. It can start pulling us out of our comfort zone because whether we know it or like it or not, like you said, we get real comfortable in our patterns. And familiarity, for some reason, for humans is like gold. Familiarity, gold. So it's like, even if it's a totally low end down spiral negative familiarity, it's like, but at least I know this.
Yeah.
I don't
And
know the unknown.
the brain, the brain does work in patterns. So that's just the process. We're taking on so much information and I don't want to get too scientific about it, but it just through the reticular activating system to the conscious mind can only process 40 bits of information a second. And the subconscious, so all of our senses, 2.2 million bits of information a second. So we've got so much information. Shut up, I know. We've got so much information being received. And I'm going to like totally get this wrong. So nobody quote me on this, but it's something like the amount of information that we receive and absorb in a day is what we would have absorbed and received in our whole lifetimes about 150, 200 years ago, something like that. Because there's
Wow.
so much information coming in through our eyes, through our ears, vibrations. There's just so much information. Think of all the apps we have on our phone. Think of all the different ways of communication we have. Think of all the information we watch, listen to, or are told. And that's all being received by our bodies, by our energetic bodies. As you were talking about the multidimensional body.
Yeah.
What does it do with all that? Our brain tries to process it in the best way it can and keep us safe. So it's like, well, I'm just going to stick in this lane because I know what happens there. And even if it's uncomfortable, even if I'm unhappy or unfulfilled, it's safe, it's familiar. And familiarity generates deeper and deeper grooves, samskaras, neural pathways. So, I think both of us probably work differently and to the similar end of helping people identify those and rewire and repattern in a way that feels easeful, because the nervous system needs to move really slowly in terms of its reprogramming, its repatterning. So when the nervous system, when we learn to titrate and feel calm and soothed in that request for change, the body will do it more easily rather than it being an assault on our senses, right? That phrase. So it's intentional, gentle presence consciousness. I call it PACE, like purposeful action with conscious energy to create sustainable change that feels good, that feels manageable, that feels like we're welcoming ourselves home, feels like we're creating a sense of belonging and loving on ourselves where we may have rejected many parts of ourselves. So that's just thought I'd jump in there with that bit of information.
I love that. I'm over here just as you're talking, just like feeling my whole beingness relax. That sounds amazing.
Helps people understand it as well. Just to even have it explained in that way, they're like, oh, well, no wonder I can't connect to that part of my intuition because my brain is so busy, my nervous system is so heightened. So what Jamie is working with is having me be quieter, softer, more intentional, more present. And I'm putting words into the work that you do, but so that I can come home, return home to myself. And those words of wisdom that are living in us, or I can connect to that higher consciousness, whether it's the global consciousness or whether it's your own higher consciousness.
Definitely. And Emma, something you said that resonated with me and again, just making sure everybody knows language and words that I'm using could be other language and words. But for instance, like the Intuitive Mentorship 101 course, when it's a 10-session course where basically it's teaching someone to strengthen their awareness of their own interconnectedness and their own intuition. It's not teaching you how to be intuitive, because the assumption is that you already are. And it's not even an assumption, it's just the truth. You already are. You're already interconnected, you're already intuitive. The course just teaches people how to become more aware of it and strengthen their awareness of it. And then by doing so, begin to trust themselves more. One of the courses, or one of the sessions of the course, is basically discerning the ego. Because oftentimes when we go within, whether it's through contemplation or meditation or prayer or just being silent or just having peace, whatever that is, whatever practice anyone has, when we go within, there's not just the vast spaciousness and the excuse me, and the mystery of all that is and all that knowledge and wisdom and love that's available for all of us. But there's also, when we go within and we close the eyes and we remove our attention away from our five senses and go inwards into that vast non-physical spaciousness, there's also, I call it the voice of ego, or the ego mind, or the critical mind. Again, lots of different words we can use to describe this. And that mind, that ego mind, critical mind, its purpose is to keep us in the physical reality and keep us alive in the physical reality, experiencing physicality. Okay. The ego has nothing to do with the multidimensional. The ego has zero to do with anything that's not related to the five physical senses. The ego is very uncomfortable in the multidimensional. The ego will do what it can to keep us away from it. The ego is like, oh, don't do that. I wouldn't trust your intuition. It'll get you into trouble. People will think you're strange. You don't have any proof. Where's the proof? The ego will do anything it can to keep us focused on the physical reality and the five senses, which honestly, sometimes the ego gets a bad reputation for that. People are like, oh, we need to thin the ego and we need to have ego deaths. It's like, okay, I would say it's beneficial to know the ego's voice so that you can recognize when it's steering things or controlling everything, or having you believe that it's true. Become more aware of it, become more, acknowledge it more, know its voice, because then when it's like, I wouldn't do that because people aren't going to like you. Guess what? That's not spiritual guidance. It never has been. That's going to be the voice of ego. Spiritual guidance is never saying, oh, don't do that because people aren't going to like you. Spiritual guidance has no concern if people like us or not. Spiritual guidance is always at the heart of what's best, true, most loving for us. It has no concern about what people are going to think or any of that. So oftentimes the ego gets a bad rep, but really all we're doing is we're coming to a place of familiarizing ourselves with it more and more so that we recognize it when it's online. And when that can be another, we could see it as a pitfall. Interesting, and as we're talking today, I'm realizing all the pitfalls are actually also gifts. Should you see it as so and recognize it as so. But one of the pitfalls when I'm working with students to strengthen their own awareness of their own intuition is that when they go into that interior world that they have to connect with their intuition or spiritual guidance, they'll always meet or face the voice of the ego. It's like, okay, what decision should I make with this choice between these jobs? Oh, you should do that because you'll make more money. It's like the ego loves money. And it's not that money's bad, and it's not there's any judgment in it, but like when some voice come through, the best way, the best direction, the best choice is this way because that's where the most money is going to be made. But it's like when I ask, but is that going to be truest for my heart, soul, my passion, my desire, my fulfillment? Is like possibly the guidance moves somewhere else, or the guidance may stay there and go, yeah, actually, this is going to be great for you spiritually too. It's like, oh, cool, win-win. It's going to be both financially beneficial and spiritually beneficial. Fantastic. But one of the things that people start to recognize is that they have an ego voice. And then what can be, again, what I say, what hurts my own feelings is when I realize how often it's online and running things. And I'm like, even though I've been doing this work for maybe somewhere between 13 and 15 years professionally, I still will recognize, I'll be like off kind of in a fantasy realm with my ego. And then I'll be like, oh my God, what was that, like 30 minutes I've been fully in my ego, just having all these thoughts about this thing. And I'm like, good Lord, okay. And I'm just like, oh my God, 30 minutes is what I just spent with that. And I'll take a break. I'll go back to my truth. I always go back to my heart. What's true in my heart? Okay, this, all right. And then remember that I'm not my ego. But wasn't it interesting that I was just fully in it for 30 minutes? So that can also be a thing that can be a pitfall plus a gift, is to become aware that, oh my God, I have this ego voice that's been running things. And I've been literally staying in this relationship for 15 years out of fear of being alone. Because my ego's been like, you're going to be alone. You're going to be alone. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to be alone. So I'll keep enduring a relationship that's not supportive of me.
That
And
is
so,
so interesting. For some reason, I've never put together that the ego may keep us away from our intuition. It's so interesting. I've never contemplated that before, I don't think.
yeah, and Emma, get this, what's even more hysterical is that when someone's consciously, actively, adeptly working with their inner self, multidimensionality, intuition, higher self, whatever that is, there's sort of thresholds that we move through of learnings, or initiations, or passages we make. Every time we move through a new threshold and get to where someone who's just beginning and they're like, oh my God, I've started receiving this guidance. Now I've started taking action on it in my life, and I've started changing my life for the better. And now I trust my guidance and I trust myself to take action because I have a load of experience that I can point to. I did it there and it worked. I did it there and it worked. I did it there and it worked. And we get to that place of all of a sudden, I trust my guidance and I trust myself to take action. And that's our new way of being. Ego jumps up with us, okay? And ego's like, look what we did. Look what we do. We trust ourselves. We take action. We're better than other people. So ego will find a way to skip all the lessons and learnings, to do the whole thing to try to get you to avoid doing any of it, to try to distract you, to try to keep you from it. But the second you get there and it becomes now your cellular level, you've changed. Ego's like, I'll join you there now, and just makes the jump. And then now starts going, this is where sometimes you may hear this out in the outside world. Someone's like, I have spiritual gifts and I'm going to bestow them on you. And I'm different than everybody else. This is where ego has made the jump with somebody who's come to some awarenesses, realizations, experience, has ingrained in their awareness, their knowing of their intuition, their telepathy, their whatever it is, their healing abilities, these things. Ego now is there with us and is starting to take credit for it all, but still, this is so funny, still trying to keep us from hitting the next level. Ego wants us to stay there because that's where ego now is comfortable. So at every step, and I when I'm working with my students, especially students who are working as, I'm going to say, in healing professions, whether that's an intuitive, a qigong instructor, Reiki, counseling, someone who's working with other people in a healing modality and wanting to incorporate more intuitive guidance into that work as a complement, especially when I'm working with people who are in service to others professionally. It's very important that we become aware of that the ego finds new ways to show up as we get more spiritual, whatever that means, as we come into those hard-won convictions, insights, experiences that change us cellularly and make us a different person, and our work is different. It's always paying attention to the new way the ego is going to transform itself or metamorphize to meet us there and start trying to take it over. So it's an ongoing practice to be attentive to. And even like when I'm working in my intuitive readings and I'm inwards and I'm aware sometimes my ego is like, one time, I always use this as an example. One time someone asked a question and spirit starts showing me a purple elephant flying through the sky, looking like a cartoon. And I'm like, and my ego's like, no way are we going to say that to the person. No way. And I'm like, I agree. I am not telling this person I'm seeing a purple elephant flying through the sky. And I say and my ego's like, mm-mm. And this is where also we can use ego as a benefit for us. So I'm like, I agree with you, ego. This is insane. So I say inwardly to spirit, I say, guys, a purple elephant flying through the sky. Are you serious right now? Everyone's like, mm-hmm. And I'm like, seriously. And everyone's like, mm-hmm. And I'm like, is there any other thing we can talk about for this person? Everyone's like, nope, it's the purple elephant flying through the sky. So you can see right there, because my ego was doubting it and skeptical and didn't want to say it, I get to work with the ego to use that as a tool to strengthen my receptivity to the guidance that Spirit's giving me. To emphasize it, to reinforce it. Are you sure? Call it double, triple, quadruple check. Are you sure, you guys? Are you making this up? Am I seeing this correctly? Is this insane? Okay. Then I start sharing about the purple elephant flying through the sky on a rug, and someone's like, yeah, that's I guess there's an Indian or a Hindu elephant. I can't think of the name of the deity, but it's a deity. It's a deity.
Yeah. Ganesha.
Thank you. And that person ended up crying and was like, I have an altar with that deity. And I'm like, oh my God, thank God. But at the same time, that's the ego doing its job, trying to keep us safe in physical reality. But I'm aware that it's there and what it's doing. So it's not taking me off track in the intuitive reading. It didn't hijack that and make it mute. I just was like, yeah, my ego's like totally triggered by this. And now I'm going to use that to strengthen and make sure that I know this is the correct message. So another pitfall / gift of doing this work too is that you become more aware of the voice of the ego and how or when it's steering everything, or how or when we're fully believing it and in its story, and then allowing us the opportunity and the choice to say, oh, okay, that's what I'm doing right now. How about I switch back over to my heart or love or intuition or oneness?
I love that. So it actually, well, first of all, being aware of the stages and the different ways the ego might show up, or the different messages you might get, or the different feelings or sensations you or your students might get. And then also being more present. I mean, it's, and again, learning again and again, like I always say in mindfulness, those moments when your attention is drawn away and you recognize and you notice it, that's just another way of strengthening that muscle, if you like, of present moment awareness without judgment. You notice and you come back, you notice and you come back, you notice and you come back, you question, you come back, you notice your mind is here, or something's questioning, or you're feeling a certain sensation, or there's doubt or distraction or whatever's showing up, and you become aware of it. It strengthens your connection to yourself and that inner trust.
Yes, definitely.
So if people want to work with you, how can they work with you? And so you've already mentioned you potentially have people from the healing arts that come and work with you, counselors, therapists, Reiki masters, or yoga instructor, teachers, educators. I'm sure you have various people come and work with you. Do you work one-on-one? You have group programs, I think you mentioned.
Yeah. So Emma, I am at the moment, the best way to connect with me and work with me is online at casagalactica.com. If someone goes to our website, casagalactica.com, you can subscribe to our newsletter and immediately get a coupon for discount on a session with me in intuitive reading. Also, as we were talking earlier, Emma, I provided some coupon codes and discounts for anyone who'd like to do an online intuitive reading with me for 60 or 90 minutes or sign up for the Intuitive Mentorship 101 course. But yeah, so right now I'm working one-on-one with people individually through intuitive readings. Like I say, the best fit for me is someone who's a dedicated inner truth seeker, somebody who's wanting to know more about themselves, who's wanting that spiritual guidance, who's wanting to trust themselves more, who's wanting to really step on to their truer, most authentic path for their soul in this lifetime. Someone who's looking for spiritual guidance, wanting to connect with past over loved ones, wanting to be more tuned into their soul calling or their soul purpose, wanting to have better relationships, whether that's a partnership or family or friends, wanting to receive guidance on best career path or work in service. And then my Intuitive Mentorship 101 course is for people who really are ready to become more aware of and strengthen their own intuition, their own inner guidance for themselves and for others. About 3/4 of the students I work with in that are typically doing work already or stepping into work, being in service to others through some sort of, I call it a healing profession again. And like you said, it could be a counselor, a therapist, an energy worker, a Reiki instructor, a plant medicine facilitator. It could be any number of modalities that someone who's really wanting to or already aware that in their work in service to others, they're starting to recognize that there's intuitive information there and they're wanting to work with it more adeptly, ethically, in integrity, and consciously.
Do have a beautiful way with words.
Thank you.
And I know you've been kind enough to give some discounts and some coupon codes. So what I will do is I'll be writing it all underneath this video in the various places it's posted, and people would just be able to click on the links and reach out to you and connect with you, because I highly recommend it. Is there anything else that is on your heart that you would like to share before we conclude?
Yeah. Emma, I think just speaking to everybody, speaking to all of us, we have this tendency to get really occupied with all the things happening in the physical world, and that has a tendency to have us believe that we're not already loved, or we're not already interconnected, or we're not already intuitive, or we're not already on our highest path, like, oh, we've made some sort of mistake or wrong turn. And I just want to remind everyone in this moment, even if we all forget 10 seconds from now, that you're already loved, you're already perfect, you're already on path, no matter if it looks like a circus or not. You're this human life is full of opportunities and catalysts to learn, love, and grow in that experience of separation from God. And somehow we're all doing it brilliantly. You're doing it brilliantly, whether you know it or not. And there's always an invitation or opportunity to just simply become more aware of yourself, or we might say to know yourself. And that anyone can do that at any time, at any age, in any sort of ability, that it's available here now for all of us. And should you feel the desire to do so, that it's available to you to know yourself, and that it's actually one of the most joyful, rewarding things, no matter the challenges or the pitfalls and the gifts. It is the true, in my observation, in my experience, the true fulfillment, where the true fulfillment lies. And so I just want to empower everybody to know that. And Emma, thank you again for being you, and for this opportunity again to have such a great conversation.
Thank you, Jamie. I always love talking to you. And I think I'm just going to end it there, because that was a beautiful message and a beautiful reminder to everyone that you are loved and you are seen and you are held.